Suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer taken into custody last week, Rex Heuermann, a married father of two, will be in court again on August 1st.
The suspect's 12-year killing spree came to an end last week when members of that task force took him into custody near his office in Manhattan. Joining us this morning is Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney on what exactly happens now. So, DA Tierney, good to see you here on the couch on such a huge story.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being here. Let me begin with this first question that's been on the mind of so many who have been asking me this since this broke last week. That this suspect was tied to those three women, a possible fourth, right? That's what he's charged with. But do you believe that Rex Heuermann is the prime suspect for all of the bodies along Gilgo Beach? Or is there a possible other serial killer out there?
So we looked at this this case. You know, I got into office January 2022. We formed the task force February 1st of 2022. We identified him as a suspect in March. We've been off and running ever since. We're working on what has been traditionally called the Gilgo 4. We're working on that, and we have no evidence with regard to participation by anybody else.
Okay, but then let's talk about the three and that possible fourth. Do you believe that Rex Heuermann worked alone, or is there an accomplice you're looking for?
There's no evidence of any accomplices.
Okay.
We know that he's married. He has two kids. Is it possible that any of these killings took place in their family home?
So, you know, we had, during the bail application, we talked about 5 questioned hairs. We had 3 of those hairs tested. We're awaiting further analysis on 2 of them. But with regard to the 3, one of the DNA profile from one of those hairs matched the defendant, and the DNA profile from 2 of those hairs matched his wife. So really the only explanation for that would be transfer. In other words, person A comes in contact with person B, and then person B has person A's hair come in contact with person C, or the victim and the defendant were at a location, you know, either a car or the house where the wife would be.
And is the wife and children cooperating, and did they know about this suspicious behavior?
So we don't believe that the wife and family knew.
They were out of town.
Yeah, knew about, yes. And during the commission of the 3 murders, travel records show that they were out of New York State during the commission of all 3 of those murders.
So we had our Pixel drone over the house as we watched the investigators, the men and women, bringing out some of that evidence that you were talking about, right? So much evidence that is found inside that home, which we were told by the commissioner earlier this morning is a very cluttered atmosphere. Can you talk about some of the items that you're removing and the significance of them? And was there anything in terms of a murder weapon found inside?
Sure. So, you know, with regard to our search warrants, you know, one of the key pieces of evidence here are hairs, fibers, DNA. So you're talking about evidence on a molecular level. So when we execute search warrants, we start with all of those really small things, and then we're looking for anything and everything, computers, cell phones. So it's a painstaking process as those forensic investigators go over that house inch by inch by inch. So, I mean, that's why it's taking such a long time.
Well, yeah, and there was this talk of the storage facility in Amityville that's being searched this morning as well. So I'm guessing it's the similar things you're looking for. But when you talk about body parts and trophies, anything jumping out that immediately ties him?
Well, you know, so the women, they were intact, you know, so we're not necessarily looking for that. But, you know, we are looking for mementos, trophies, or really anything that could link this defendant back to those women or those crime scenes.
Have you found anything? I mean, we heard about left shoes. We heard about this hammer that's been used. We heard about the hemp that they were wrapped around.
So you know, the amount of evidence that we're getting, both digital, forensically, and otherwise, is massive.
You're trying so hard not to say something
well,
right now.
You know what we do? What we do is we don't talk. We don't make conjecture. I don't, at least. We don't talk about what we think. We talk about what we know, and we get it back in the lab. We examine it. We're careful. And then we make our conclusions.
You know, and I just want to zero in on that hammer for a moment, because there was this video that I'm sure you've seen that kind of circulated, this interview that he did, right, that was put out there, where he talks about this architect's hammer, and that's how it's his favorite weapon, or favorite tool. Was that at all found, and are you looking for that item?
We're looking for everything, but I will say, with regard to the autopsy done on the 4 women, the cause of death was homicidal violence, and that encompasses a broad category. And basically, what it means is there was no overt injury to the body. so there was no fractures or
Right.
anything like that.
Okay,
or obvious gunshot wounds or something.
I want to talk about this watershed moment in the case because I think it's so important. Like you said, you took over in January of 2022. February is when that task force was created, but it was March when these ties were made of Rex Heuermann to a Chevy Avalanche, right? And that is really kind of what jump-started everything for the next year and a half. Can you talk about that moment?
Sure. So the day before Amber Costello, the last victim, she disappeared on September 2nd of 2010. On September 1st, she had interaction with an individual who was driving an Avalanche, and also the physical description was of a very large man, 6'4" to 6'6", very thickly built, just a large individual, white glasses, a thick dark hair, so when we saw that this defendant owned an Avalanche, we also saw that he lived in Massapequa Park and worked in Midtown Manhattan, and that was significant because he lived and worked in a constrained area where the FBI had determined there was cell phone usage of interest to the case. So all of those things, sort of fit together. So from March 14th, 2022, about 6 weeks after we started the task force, we focused in on this individual, and we were sort of off and running. And then we went back, of course, and we examined the hairs through mitochondrial DNA analysis, and then we got those profiles. So, but the watershed moment was that March 14th.
Incredible police work.
I have to ask about this woman who was riding a bike in the park, and she claims that recently Rex Heuermann jumped out and was taunting her and harassing her to the point where she filed a police report. She took the time to do that. Was he under surveillance 24/7? Did you know about that? And were you worried that he was tracking other women?
So he was under surveillance, physical and otherwise. So we're continuing to look into that. And during my press conference, what I did talk about was that this tension, this balance between gathering evidence and getting the evidence that you need to establish your case in secret, which is effective, while also considering public safety. And because he was continuing to use burner phones and because he was continuing to contact sex workers, that was, notwithstanding the surveillance, that was concerning to us, and that is why, one of the reasons why that Thursday we decided we need to take this down.
That was my question, right? Because I asked the police commissioner earlier about why Thursday, why that very moment. So over the past year and a half since he came on your radar, he had been using and seeing face-to-face sex workers.
Correct.
And during that time that he was meeting those women, he was under surveillance. So you didn't fear for those women's safety?
So what was happening was, we went back and had the 4 burner phones that we used. We were able to link the defendant to those. And then we continued to work backwards, but we're always a little bit behind. And it wasn't until very recently that we caught up. And then once we caught up, that caused us concern because now we had sort of confirmation of that he was, corresponding with workers.
It's incredible police work, a multi-agency approach to all of this.
I just have to ask one more question about him being behind bars. Is he under suicide watch? And I know that he was crying saying he didn't do it.
Well, so he, the sheriff, we have a very professional sheriff, and he actually touched upon this in the press conference. He is being appropriately monitored because we want to keep him safe, and we want to make sure that he has his day in court.
DA Tierney, keep us posted as the investigation continues. I know you have a lot of work ahead of you, but appreciate you making the time this morning here in person to talk about this.
And thank you so much.
All right.